So welcome everybody, lovely to see you. We will continue our journey into the lymphatic system. So we started last week focusing a lot on sort of the idea of lymphatic fluid being a connective tissue, just like blood and fascia, and really the connection of all of those structures to each other and to how we experience our body, our energy, even our mind. We will continue that journey today with a really, even though we already had this last week, strong focus on the fluidity of everything in our life, not just our lymph system, but just in general. Lives are very, very fluid, they're very impermanent, they're always changing, they're always moving. That's kind of what we will focus on from a thematic sort of perspective today. But all in service of moving lymphatic fluid from the periphery of our body toward our heart so that we can continue with this cleansing and immune function and nutrient function of the immune system very safely for the rest of our lives. So that's where we are situated in our topic. So I invite you to find your spot for your opening centering. So you could be seated, you could be lying down. If you are choosing a seat, make sure you're choosing the kind of seat that allows you to sit upright with a natural spine. I know we have maybe at least one new person here today, so I'm just going to show that a little bit from the side. You might notice that I'm seated on the floor. I have a lift under my seat. And what this helps do is it makes sure that the tops of my hip bones are higher than my knees. This allows for the spine to be in its natural curve and for the crown of the head to rise up naturally. So if you are seated on the floor or on a chair, that's kind of the arrangement you want for your spine, for everything to flow naturally and freely through your body. If you're seated on a chair for the opening centering, scoot away from the back of the chair so that you're sitting freely and under your own muscular power. At the end of class, when we do the closing centering, that's a whole other story. Then you can really lean into the support of the chair. If you're lying down, maybe a little lift under the knees is helpful, and perhaps a blanket under the head reaching all the way down to the tops of the shoulder blades. The lift under the knees is nice because it releases any tension out of the hip creases and through that also out of the back. And so it just allows for a more complete ability to let go a bit in the moment. And then whatever shape you have chosen for your opening centering, make a discerning decision about how you would like to place your eyes today. They could be open, they could be fully closed, they could be at half mast with a soft gaze somewhere ahead of you. And then check in with how you might like to place your hands, pondering that connection of how you place your hands to the signals that you might give to your nervous system. So hands facing down, perhaps resting on the thighs, might signal grounding, earthing. Palms turned up might signal to the nervous system that you're ready for inspiration, for being out in this community. Hands at the heart may signal a need to move inward, to introspect. Lots of other options, of course, exist. You will find what you need in this moment, and you know that you can always change it up if that changes for you. You can go with the fluidity of life and change your mind. It's a healthy thing. And gently tune into your body. And draw in particular attention, and with particular intention, your attention to all of the fluid movement that happens in your body day in and day out. Most immediately to our purpose, you might imagine And draw your attention to the flow of lymphatic fluid. Always moving toward your heart, no matter where it comes from, whether from your big toe, your left shoulder, your right pinky finger. It doesn't matter where lymphatic fluid is coming from. Its movement is always toward the heart. It picks up the fluid in the interstitial spaces, these little intracellular or intercellular spaces between all the cells of your body. Picking it up to transport it back to the heart where it is moved back into circulation in your blood. And so the fluidity of the lymphatic system comes from it absorbing fluid that's left behind during the nutrient exchange at the arteries, between the arteries and the veins, or rather their capillaries. And so the fluid in your lymphatic system over the course of the day will amount to about 3 or 4 liters or 3 or 4 quarts of fluid that it recycles and repurposes. So imagine all of that fluid that otherwise would get stuck in your tissues, moving through these lymphatic vessels toward the heart. Just as your blood moves from the heart outward throughout the body and then returns to the heart. Your heart has the capacity to pump blood. Your lymphatic fluid does not have the joy of an active pump. It relies on its fluidity that comes from your breathing and all of your muscular movements over the course of the day. Fluidity is also present in your breath. Not only does the breath contribute to the flow of lymphatic fluid, but the breath in and of itself has a flow. Air flows in through the nose, where it is transformed through various mechanisms so that then it becomes breath that can flow into your lungs, that can release oxygen into the blood, where this oxygen flows through your body to release oxygen into the tissues, into the cells, to pick up carbon dioxide, which then flows through the blood back into the lungs, where it is released into the alveoli and flows out as breath. Amazing. Fluidity all around, in body and breath. There's fluidity even in your mind. A fluid mind is open to new learning. A fluid mind is open to the reality that life requires change, that everything is impermanent. A fluid mind can change its mind, take in new information, throw out old information, take in new information, blend it with old information to create new wisdom. When the fluidity of the mind is blocked, our opinions become stale, our attitudes and beliefs become rigid. We close ourselves down to new information. So just as fluidity in body and breath is important to your health and well-being, so is fluidity in the mind. There's great wisdom to that. And so fluidity also marks this wise, deeper intelligence of the layers of your human experience. And there is an actual psychological term called fluid intelligence. And what fluid intelligence refers to is our capacity to take prior learning and apply it in new situations. To take new learning and apply it to old situations so that we can actually fluidly try new approaches to life. Fluid intelligence is a true marker of wisdom, where we bring together everything that is meaningful and create something new. And of course, there's a deep joy in that capacity. And even this joy, which marks the fifth layer of our human experience, is fluid, in that we all know that joy is infectious. When you walk into a room with joy, you spread that joy. It flows through the room. It flows into the other people. It flows into your relationship. And so we are very fluid beings in our body, in our breath, in our mind, in our intelligence and wisdom, and even in our joy and in our relationships. We are fluid because we live in a world that is ever changing. We live interdependent with lots of other beings, with the greater web of life. We live with the notion of impermanence, where everything is always in flux. From this attunement to your own fluidity in all of your layers, I invite you, if it suits you in this moment, to bring your hands to your heart. Today, perhaps deeply appreciating that where you are placing your hands here at your heart region, broadly defined, that's a center of your fluidity. And so from this center of fluidity, as you perhaps bow your head to your heart, see if there is an intention that you are bringing to the mat this morning. This is not a fixed outcome or a rigid thing that you're hoping to achieve, but it is a fluid quality that you would like to bring to the mat and perhaps into your life. And so notice if anything emerges for you in the form of an intention, perhaps as a word or a phrase or a felt sense, or just an open space where an intention might emerge later. And fluidly draw it into your heart region, your center of fluidity. And if you would like, you could also choose to send that intention, that quality outward into your greater web of life, letting it fluidly spread itself into your relationships. And then whenever you are ready to do so, you can release your hands if they were lifted. You can open your eyes if they were closed. You can rise to a seat if you were lying down. And you can lift your gaze if it was lowered. And welcome, everyone. And once you have arrived in a seat, I invite you to just very gently begin to shrug your shoulders up and down. And to notice how this shrugging of your shoulders allows you to focus your attention of your mind, even your attention of your breath, your attention of your movement to this center of fluidity, this heart region. You could even keep your hands there if you would like, perhaps fingertips gently touching the clavicles, the collarbones. As you continue to shrug your shoulders up and down, And just sense into the movement that this very gentle shrugging brings into this region of the clavicles. And then if you would like to use your hands a little bit, you could rest them very lightly on that indentation above the collarbones, where you might sense a gentle softness. You don't press your fingers hard here, you're just resting them there to sort of appreciate the importance of this region to your lymphatic system. You have a large set of lymph nodes here. You don't want to press or massage lymph nodes, so you are just resting your fingers here to give yourself a prompt to realize that this is the region of the body where you would like to create negative pressure for your lymphatic fluid. So you want to clear this region of lymphatic fluid, and you're doing this right now with your shoulder shrugs. And what this does is it clears a pathway for your lymph to travel in from the periphery. You know this by now, we've talked about this before. You could bring a gentle little circling of the shoulders now to this movement, always moving toward the back. Fingers just lightly resting still on that region just above the clavicles. And just notice how much movement the shoulder movement creates movement here in the tissues around your clavicles. You could even gently rest, maybe crossing your hands if that doesn't feel too constricting, or if that doesn't create some sense of vulnerability, or you could have the hands gently resting at the sides of the neck, or you could do one hand at a time. And maybe adding a very gentle stroking as you continue to roll the shoulders back and shrug them up at the same time. If all of that's too much, you could let go of the shoulder movement and just find that gentle stroking sensation, or you could continue to shrug the shoulders but not circle, or you could not move the hand, you could just have them rest here as you move. What you're doing here is you are inviting the tissues in the neck and around the collarbones to move around those little lymphatic vessels, the capillaries and the vessels themselves, to give a slight massaging action to those vessels, slowly moving lymphatic fluid out of these regions toward those nodes in this region, and then into the heart. Really not into the heart, but into the subclavian veins that run to the heart. And so this is how lymphatic fluid is returned into the blood, because that's where it came from. Remember, it's fluid that was picked up between the capillaries of the arteries and the capillaries of the veins in the cells that sort of leaked out and didn't get picked up by the blood. So this is just a clever way of bringing that fluid back. Then if you'd like, you could make that circle just a little bit bigger on one side, and then a little bit bigger on the other side. Really noticing the clearing action here in this central region. You're not pressing on lymph nodes, you are moving tissue around the lymphatic vessels that then bring the fluid to the nodes where the fluid is cleansed, inspected, and then moved on toward the heart. And then let the movement in the shoulders go if that's okay. Take a finger to your chin, gently drop the chin down and draw it toward the back plane of the body. And then with your exhalation, gently turn your head to the right. You don't have to push hard on your range of motion here. With the inhalation, you'll bring it back to center. And then with your next exhalation, you'll bring it to the left. Keep doing that fluidly with the flow of your breath. Maybe every now and then when you're at center, rechecking that the chin is slightly down and the head is moving toward the back plane of the body. And as you do this, begin to appreciate how you are moving muscles and fascia and ligaments and tendons in the neck region. And all of that movement has an impact on the lymphatic vessels. Gently massaging them, gently helping move fluid along toward the heart. This movement doesn't have to be strong, it doesn't have to be deep, it just has to be movement that invites your fascia to stay gentle, soft, supple, hydrated. If you started with me with a turn to the right, the next time you have turned your head to the left, when you come back from there, keep it at center. Take a couple rounds of breath, sense into the neck region and sense if you can feel lymphatic fluid draining down from the neck through these nodes at the collarbones into your subclavian veins, these veins that run underneath the clavicles, and then into the heart. Your imagination is powerful. If you just close your eyes and imagine this fluid draining, it will actually help it along. And you can just do that. Maybe you can add a little bit of gentle stroking again if you would like. You could do the Spock fingers that we did last week and draw the hands gently along the side of the neck and even the skull, gently stroking behind the ears and in front of the ears. Maybe even stroking down from the back of the neck where the head meets the neck toward the front. Very gentle action here. And you could continue to do this stroking action, or you could let go of the stroking and then after you tuck the head down and back, like we always do before we start to move it, think about looking with your eyes to the right as you drop your left ear toward the shoulders, or draw your right ear toward the ceiling. That's really the better way to cue that. And think about what you are doing here. You are asking for resilience in the right side of the neck, and you are compressing the left side of the neck. This is fascial and muscular movement that helps pump your lymphatic vessels. With an inhalation, you can lift the head to center. Take perhaps a round of breath here very patiently and wait for an exhalation to then lower to lift the left ear to the left upper side, looking up to the left with your eyes helps facilitate that. The right ear drops toward the shoulder, but really think about the left ear reaching for the sky, for the ceiling, as you look up to the left. And sense the compression now on the right and the resilience on the left. If you would like a little bit of movement, then you can move up with the inhale, down with the exhale, switching sides a few times, letting the eyes lead the way. Looking up to the right when you lift the right ear, looking up to the left when you lift the left ear. You might even notice if you have a little bit more constriction or tightness on one side than the other. Most of us do, just because we have a dominant side to our body. Often that side is a little tighter. Sometimes it's the opposite side, so don't let me bias you. Just sense into your neck. And then know that in areas where you have a lot of tightness that prevents free movement, you likely also have less lymphatic movement. And so that's the region you would like to move and stroke and give some attention to, maybe even fluidly breathing into that region to free it up. The next time you come upright with your head, stay there. Maybe take a few shoulder circles or a few shoulder shrugs. And then let that movement increase yet again in the shoulder region, this time also beginning to think about all of the lymph nodes that you have under the arms, the outer chest region. These are the lymph nodes that are often affected when you have sentinel lymph node dissections, or if you have lymph nodes that have been removed. So there could be particular tenderness for you, or tightness, or fibrosis. And so really make this movement work for you. Don't force anything. Don't overdo, but also don't underdo. Give yourself the joy of whatever movement is possible for you here in the arms. And then if it feels okay for you, begin, maybe you could even make chicken wings. I like to anchor my hands here. You don't have to do that if that's uncomfortable. But you're getting some compression now around the elbow. You have lymph nodes all along the length of the arms. Our focus is still kind of on that chest and axilla region, but you know, everything is moving already along even the periphery. We've cleared the center, so we're ready for this. If you feel it necessary, every now and then you can stop, you can brush, you can stroke, you can shrug. All up to you. This coming back to center is a good idea, even as we just start moving into the periphery, to just continuously encourage the lymphatic fluidity in this central region of your overall fluidity. If you are ready to do it, you could lift your arms now and just gently grab the left wrist with the right hand and bring a little bit of a side stretch, thinking specifically about this region around the axilla, around the side chest here. All of these lymph nodes are now being sent lymphatic fluid from the work of the muscles around here, from the compression of the fascia. So the lymph nodes very cleverly collect themselves, and go ahead and switch sides, around large joints. Wherever there is a joint, there are big muscles around that joint and ligaments and tendons that help move the joint. And so those muscles tend to be away from the joint. And so as these muscles and that fascia is moving, compressing, contracting, it is moving fluid toward the nodes in that joint region. I think it's a really, really clever design. And so as you're stretching a little bit side to side here, you could add a little bit of oomph by pressing or making a fist and pressing your thumb, if you can handle that. If you have some challenges with a little bit of arthritis in the thumb, leave the thumb outside and just make a strong fist to the degree that you can. If you can handle it, bring the thumb inside the fist and press. And you might notice how now you are engaging muscularly along the length of the arm. That muscular contraction moves lymphatic fluid. A couple more times on each side. The more muscular engagement you feel in your arms as you now come to cactus arms, the more fluid you know you are moving. And so in your cactus arms now, you can make some wrist circles. And you could make some fluid waves with your fingers while you're still wrist circling. You might open and close the arms a little bit, so flexing and extending the elbow a little bit. Get creative. You could be very fluid and be more like a dancer here. Whatever feels good to you. The idea is that the kind of movement in this region doesn't matter. It just matters that you move fluidly, and you could just all along, all the while, think about, wow, with each little movement, all the way down to your fingers, you are compressing lymphatic vessels, lymphatic capillaries, and then when the movement releases, fluid comes into those lymphatic vessels, and all along with each squeezing, with each compression, fluid, lymphatic fluid is moved toward your heart. And it can flow backwards. Once you set it on its path toward the heart, little backflow valves prevent any draining backwards. So have fun here. Bring your joy into this moment as you move fluidly through the upper body here. Get creative, do your own thing, and maybe even give yourself some hugs as you gently begin to open and close, to bring a little bit of flexion and extension along the length of the spine. At the same time, you are also bringing a little bit of movement into the trunk, the region around another large set of lymph nodes at the center of your abdomen, and also the region of the cisterna chyli, which is kind of a holding tank for lymphatic fluid, as it moves upward from the lower part of the body toward the heart. You're continuing to create negative pressure around the clavicles with all this beautiful hugging sort of motion. And then find some stillness for a moment in the arms. Sense into your fingertips, sense into your wrists, your forearms, your elbows, your upper arms, your shoulder pits, your side chest, the region of the neck, the face, the brain, and really imagine how fluid is collecting, moving toward the heart, being returned to the blood. And while you are sitting still now, your breath is still moving. And as long as your breath is still moving, there is still a gentle motion around the region of the diaphragm, which is that region of the plethora of lymph nodes in your abdomen, and also the cisterna chyli in the abdominal region. And so just as it's brilliant that a lot of our lymph nodes are around large joints, it is brilliant that there are a lot of lymph nodes, and this little cistern of lymphatic fluid live right around our diaphragm, because what is one thing that we always do from the moment we're born to the moment we die? We breathe. And that breathing is movement of the diaphragm. And so these lymph nodes are getting a nice massage with every fluid breath that you take in and every fluid breath that you release out. If you would like, you could take a moment to bring your hands to that region. So the thumbs kind of toward the breastbone, the little fingers on the navel. Your arms could kind of hug in by your side so that you can kind of feel your side waist, maybe your low ribs, and just sense into your breath. And you might notice that with the inhalation, your diaphragm contracts downward. So it's a very fluid motion. The diaphragm contracts down toward the abdominal cavity, and all of your organs below have to rearrange themselves. That's part of the movement outward that you feel in the front of the belly. But then there's also that jellyfish movement that we talked about last week. As the diaphragm moves down when it meets that resistance of the organs, then at that point your low ribs move out and up. All of that beautiful diaphragmatic action just on the inhalation already really massages this entire region, including the vessels that bring fluid into the lymph nodes here. And then notice that on the exhalation, your diaphragm actually relaxes. The organs move back into their original place. The low ribs move inward, downward and inward. Squeezing different vessels now, lymphatic vessels, hydrating different structures, different sets of fascia as we use slightly different muscles. And then exaggerate the exhalation. So as you exhale, instead of letting that be the beautiful, gentle, wonderful passive exhale that we breathe most of the time, give an extra little push of breath out. Hold it out for a moment and then very gently breathe in. Do all of that through the nose. And notice how that contraction, that extra oomph on the exhale and that holding really engages muscles around the midriff of your body. This is a great movement in and of itself to start stimulating lymphatic flow. Do that a couple more times. And just marvel about the design of your body, where simply the breath can move fluid that needs to be moved so efficiently. You can continue simply to do that, to breathe here with a little extra oomph on the exhale, or to breathe here with a bumblebee breath, or you can begin to bring a little bit of extra rotation into that region. Exhaling to turn to one side, inhaling, letting the arms flow up, exhaling to the other side. Now you know why we add, well, not necessarily the only reason, but one of the reasons we add the arm movement here is what happens. You lift your shoulder girdle, you move fluid from this central region of your fluidity, even as you are also engaging the muscles of your core to give even more support to lymphatic flow in the center of your body. So you can tell why yoga is a great practice for lymphatic flow. Whether we explicitly talk about it or not doesn't matter. This month we're explicitly talking about it, but a lot of these movements we just do as a matter of course in yoga. And so with everything we do, we are moving lymphatic fluid. We are moving fascia, that connective tissue that binds everything in our body together. Talked about that a little bit last week. And fascia and your lymphatic vessels, fascia and lots of structures, but lymphatic vessels included, have a very interactive relationship. If your fascia is dehydrated and stuck, then it also can restrict the flow of fluid in your lymphatic vessels because it might limit the diameter of those vessels. And so all the things that are good for fascia, like hydration, exercise, breathing, healthy eating, sleep, those are also all things that are great for your lymphatic system. If you've had enough of the rotation, you can stop. with the side to side movement. You can take a couple more conscious breaths, just being at the center of your being. You could take a few more side bends if you'd like, and this time really draw your attention less to the axilla and the outer chest and more to the side waist, the region that we're working with now. So it's the same outer movement, but you have a different inner focus on fluidity. And so as you pivot side to side, if you're choosing to do this, think about this lower region of the side body, kind of the flanks, and just flow side to side for a bit, knowing that you're doing a lot of good here for your lymphatic system, your fascial system, your muscular system, your spine. You're bringing resilience, fluidity into the body, into the breath, even into your mind. You can continue to move side to side. You could come back to some rotation. You can simply sit and breathe. Notice what feels good to you. If there's too much arm movement, you could let go of the arm movement. Just notice. The other thing that you might enjoy for a moment here is the Sufi circle that we do so often, especially during our warm-up. The Sufi circle kind of combines a lot of the things that we already did. You also hear me call this stirring the pot of experience. And it's a very fluid movement. And what we're adding through this movement now is some activation of the musculature, the fascia, the ligaments, and the tendons around the hip joint. And you might recall from last week, as you perhaps switch direction of your circle, that there is another big set of lymph nodes in the region of your groins, so right in front of the large hip joint. That is such a beautiful joint in that it has so many ranges of motion. It can flex and extend. It can move in circles. It can move outward. It can move inwards. It can abduct and adduct. So all of the various muscles around that joint then bring movement into the joint. Fascia moves, ligaments move, tendons move all around this hip region, just in this little bit of a Sufi circle that you can let go now, maybe a couple more rounds, and then come to center. And then from here, if you are seated on a chair, you can stay just where you are. If you're seated on the floor, you can stay seated on the floor, but maybe no longer in a cross-legged position. But you could also, if you feel comfortable on the floor, lie all the way down, or you could be part way down. But being on a seat is perfectly fine, because what we're going to do next, you can do from anywhere. You're going to take one knee and bring it close to the chest, and then the other knee and bring it close to the chest. So you're kind of, you're just flexing the hip joint and then letting go. If you're on the ground, you have the ability to have a larger range of motion. You could bring yourself all the way flat and fully extend here the hip joint as you move. It's not necessary. You can get just as much benefit from doing this in a seat, which is how we've been doing it in prior classes. But seeing that more of you are actually on the floor, I thought I'd show you this from the floor position, because you have more range now in the joint. Doesn't make it better, just makes it different, gives you a different option. And then if you would like, you could catch one leg, again, whether you're seated or lying down, doesn't matter, and just draw it toward the chest a little bit. Keeping the other leg either on the chair or on the ground, if you can. If you want to bend the knee, that's perfectly fine. And then take the knee with your hands and draw little circles. You can do this seated or lying down. So you're not circling the knee, you're circling the hip joint. Your knee is not made to make circles. You're literally putting the hands on the knee to stabilize the knee so that you're not rotating in the knee, but all of the movement is coming out of the hip joint. If you can keep your knees stable without the hands, then you don't have to have the hands on the knees to draw these circles. And then circle the leg in the other direction. So if you had a paintbrush on your knee, you would be drawing big circles onto an imaginary canvas, but the movement is not coming from the knee, it is coming from the hip joint. And then whenever you're ready to switch sides, you can switch sides. So remember, first you draw the leg into, or toward, I should say, the chest. The other leg can extend flat on the ground, or it can rest on the chair if you're seated. And just draw that leg in a little bit. And as you're drawing one leg in and the other leg is extended or just bent at 90 degrees, imagine also the release now in the leg that is now still and that before drew the circles. And imagine fluid continuing to move upward toward the heart through all of those vessels, through the inguinal nodes, through those central nodes in the abdomen, all the way up toward the nodes in the region of the clavicles, and from there into the subclavian veins. And then if you're ready to do it, you can have your hands on your knee to stabilize the knee and begin to draw circles again. It's the hip joint that moves, even though it's the knee that draws the circle, but the knee is completely stable. If you need the reminder, then keep your hand on that knee to keep it very stable. You don't want to bring rotation into a knee joint. It's not made for that. But if you can keep your knee stable as you circle through the hip joint, then you can release the hands and you'll be able to make larger circles. And imagine that you're drawing nice big circles with that paintbrush on your knee, on that imaginary canvas. At some point, and maybe that point is now, begin to move the circle in the other direction. You're working slightly different muscles, or you're working the same muscles in a slightly different way. And when you're moving muscle, you're moving fascia, and when you're moving fascia, you're moving lymph from those regions around this hip joint toward the nodes in the groin region. Those are called your inguinal lymph nodes. And then if you would like, you can let those circles come to rest. If you're on the ground, let both legs extend onto the earth. If you're seated on a chair, just sit still for a moment. And now feel the flow of lymph in both legs. You have activated so much movement. And remember, there are little backflow valves in your lymphatic system. So all this fluid is still moving upward toward the heart. If you're lying on the ground, it has a slightly easier job because you're not completely against gravity. But even if you're seated on a chair and everything has to move fully against gravity, it will still move upward. If you're worried, you can always bring a little bit of stroking to the neck, to the muscles, the region around your collarbones to keep that negative pressure here, to help fluid draw upward, just because fluid likes to flow from high pressure to low pressure. You can stay here with the imagination, with stroking, however you would like, or if you are on the ground, you can bring one knee up and then begin to extend and flex the knee. You can do the same thing seated on a chair. You are straightening and bending the knee. Both versions are equally beautiful for mobilizing now lymphatic flow to your knee joint, and then from the lower leg, and then toward the inguinal nodes above the knee. If you're on the ground, you'll notice you have more range of motion again here. You have more opportunity to bring the foot closer to the bum than when you're seated on a chair. Again, that's not necessarily better, it's just different. And so if you're comfortable working on the earth, feel free to do that. Couple more pumps and then switch sides. Bringing the knee above the hip if you're lying down, and then flexing and extending the knee joint. That particular motion is the natural motion of your knee. It can extend and it can flex. Flexing means you're bending the knee, extending means you're straightening the leg. There is a little bit of side to side motion just because you need that for walking in the knee joint, but you should never make circles, deliberate big circles from the region of the knee. That's not a healthy movement for the ligaments and the tendons here. The knee is most happy when it simply moves through flexion and extension, and there's plenty of muscular action here for lymphatic flow to happen through those lymph nodes behind the knee. If you're working on the floor or even on the chair, you could also take a few rounds of doing both legs at the same time, bending and flexing at the knee with both legs at the same time. What you will feel when you do this, especially if you actively press the low back into the ground, is that you're starting to really engage your abdominal muscles. And so what are you doing here? Well, you are helping move along lymphatic fluid through that abdominal region, where you not only have large connections of lymph nodes, but we also have that cisterna chyli, that layover point for all the lymphatic fluid that's coming from your legs, from your big toes and your little toes, through the abdomen to be pumped toward the heart. And then if you're on the ground, you have the option of straightening the legs and holding them up in the air, and then flexing and extending. Technically, this is dorsiflexion, flexing and plantar flexing through the ankles. So you're now pumping through the ankles. So drawing the toes toward you really strongly, and then pressing the toes away. The slower you do this, the more muscular action you have. If you are on a chair, then you can do this by coming to your tippy toes and then coming to your heels and maybe lifting the toes a tiny bit. Tippy toes, lifting toes. Same action, right side up instead of upside down. So just as beautiful, just as helpful as lying on your back and flexing and extending, or dorsiflexing and plantar flexing through the ankle. If you are on a chair and you would like to do this particular movement standing, that's another option. So if you want a little bit more movement, but you're not on the floor, that's another option for you. And we did this last week too. If you are on the floor, you now also have the option, and you could do this standing or you could do this seated. On the floor, you can do this with both legs at the same time. Standing or seated, you have to do it with one side at a time. You can make some big circles again in the hip joint, pressing the low back into the ground. If you're seated, you can do this one leg at a time, like this. If you're standing, you can do it maybe with one hand on something like this. And if you like, you can bring the ankle flexion or the ankle movements into that at the same time. So on the chair or standing, you again have to do this one leg at a time, but on the ground, you could have your Barbie toes in one half of the circle, and then you could have your toes toward your face on the other half. So you're also moving the ankle. You could even make circles with the ankle. And then you could even think about making those same wave-like movements that we made with the fingers earlier. You could try to add those to the toes. They're not going to be as fluid as through the fingers. And then if you are on the floor, if you're seated, you might be able to do this seated. You could add the arms so that now you're kind of like a baby on its back, just moving everything. And in fact, you could begin to literally move everything. Just lying on your back or seated on your chair. Really having fun here like a baby. And in fact, if you want to connect your hands to your feet and rock side to side a little bit, then you are in a shape that we in yoga call happy baby. It is our joyful pose of just having fun. If you're seated or standing, just keep moving your limbs separately. Bring some final joyful movements into wherever you are. And then at some point, find quietude. Just stand or sit or lie for a moment and feel the fluidity pulsing through your body. Really imagine all of those lymphatic vessels carrying fluid from everywhere in your body toward the heart. You are a pumping, pulsing, fluid physical being, either lying here, standing here, or sitting here. Sense into that fluidity in your body, wherever you are in space. And welcome the reality that you have lymph fluid moving through you, blood moving through you. You have synovial fluid moving through your joints, bringing nourishment into the tissues in the joints. You have cerebrospinal fluid flowing up and down your spine into your brain, distributing nutrients. It's amazing how much fluidity there is in your body. Fluid around your fascia, nourishing, hydrating, supporting. If you're still standing, you might want to begin to transition either to a seat or onto your back. As you then expand your awareness to sense the fluidity, not just in your body, but also in your breath. Breath flowing in, breath flowing out. The flow of breath deeply connected to the flow of literal fluids in your body. And as you facilitate a flow in your body and a flow in your breath, you are also facilitating fluidity in your mind. You're dispelling rigidity. You're opening your mind to new ways of being, to the acceptance of change and impermanence, the enjoyment of the flow of life. You're opening pathways to wise discernment that relies on fluid intelligence. and that leans in on our capacity to be joyful beings and to spread fluidly that joy into our greater environments, into our relationships, into every experience we have. Joy in the midst of challenge. The joy of being able to move, to breathe, to flow, no matter what. And then invite your body to release and let go of whatever is not necessary to contract right now. Invite your breath to become subtle and gentle and fluid, guided by the flow of life force that moves through all of us. Invite your mind to let be, to let go, to let flow. As you move into about a minute of silence until my voice brings you back. And very gently reawaken your senses, inviting sound once again to flow into your ears. Noticing once again the presence of any aroma or fragrance in your room. Sensing in what your body needs in this moment to feel fluid and alive. Perhaps wiggling, stretching, perhaps simply resting. Gently tune into the flow of your breath. If you are lying on the earth and you would like to close the practice in a seat, this would be a lovely time to gently flow to a seat. When you are in a seat and you feel inspired to do so, let your hands come to the center of your fluidity, to your heart region. And once more feel the fluidity within you, the fluidity around you. And ponder if there is a takeaway for you from class today, something meaningful, something interesting. And perhaps allow that takeaway to flow through your body, to blend with your breath, to support fluidity and new learning in the mind, to contribute to the fluid intelligence of your wise being, and even to inform the joy that you share with your greater web of life. And perhaps that takeaway also blends in some fluid way with the intention that you had set at the beginning of practice to create a dedication of the merit arising from your time on the mat today. If such a dedication emerges for you, perhaps use your next breath in to let it flow into the entirety of your being. And use your next breath out to invite that dedication to flow outward into your greater web of life. And thank you all so much for sharing these Thursday morning practices. It is a joy